All right, today we're jumping into something pretty wild. We're talking about a new way to measure the complexity of abstract information, the ideas themselves. Imagine you had a ruler, but instead of measuring inches, it measured ideas. Let's dig in.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to start with this really elegant concept called ultimate compression. Then we'll see how that idea is getting stretched from simple data, like text files, to entire abstract structures. After that, we'll really look at what this ruler for ideas is actually measuring. And finally, we'll zoom out and see how this all connects to some of the biggest questions in science today.
So, first things first, how in the world do you even begin to measure something as fuzzy as complexity? Well, it's a huge question, but it has a surprisingly simple answer that all starts with one core idea: compression. Okay, let me ask you this. Picture two text files. Each one is a megabyte. The first one is just the letter A typed out 1,000,000 times. The second one is 1,000,000 characters of just total random gibberish. Which one is more complex?
You probably have a gut feeling that the random string is more complex, right? And you'd be totally correct. The reason why? Well, it all boils down to how hard each one is to describe. For that string of A's, the description is super easy. Just print the letter A 1,000,000 times. But for the random string, the shortest way to describe it is, well, you just have to write out the whole thing, every single random character.
Now, this very cool idea actually has a formal name. It's called Kolmogorov complexity. It's a really powerful concept that says the complexity of something is just the length of the shortest possible computer program you'd need to write to generate it.
The best way to think about this is a zip file. It's the perfect analogy. You know how a really repetitive file, like our wall of A's, can be compressed down to almost nothing? That means it has low complexity. But a truly random file, it barely compresses at all, because the shortest description is just the file itself. That means it has really, really high complexity.
Okay, so for decades, this whole idea was pretty much just used for simple strings of data. But this is where things get really interesting. Researchers are now taking this exact same concept and applying it to something way bigger: entire structures. And this is a total game changer.
So just to make sure we're on the same page, the classic method is simple. You look at some data, you figure out the absolute smallest, most clever computer program that could create it. And the size of that program, that's your complexity score. Simple, right?
And here's the big leap. What if we could use that exact same logic, not just for a string of text, but for an entire system, an abstract structure, something with different parts and all the relationships between them?
And believe it or not, that's what they're doing. They're actually building new kinds of programming languages just to describe these abstract structures called categories. But check this out. The basic logic is 100% identical. Find the shortest program that can describe the whole structure, and the length of that program is its complexity.
This is the key difference right here. We're making a huge shift. We're going from measuring the information locked inside of data to measuring the information locked inside of a structure. The question isn't just how hard is it to type this out anymore. Now it's how hard is it to describe this entire system.
Okay, so we've got this new tool, this new kind of ruler. But what is this ruler for ideas really measuring? What does it actually tell us about the world?
The ambition here is just staggering. This quote from the research paper gets right to the heart of it. This isn't just some clever programming trick. It's a serious attempt to actually quantify the essence of abstract information, completely separate from whatever it's written on or stored in.
And when we keep saying structure, what we're really talking about is this concept from math called a category. Now, don't let the name freak you out. It's just a formal way to draw a map of a system, any system. It describes the objects in the system and all the relationships between them. Think of a family tree. The people are the objects, the lines connecting them are the relationships. A category is just a universal blueprint for describing stuff like that.
And here's the really cool part. This new ruler actually works. One of the key findings is that if you have two systems that are structurally identical, even if they look totally different on the surface, they have the exact same Kolmogorov complexity. This is huge because it proves the method is measuring the deep structure, not just the superficial details.
So, for our last piece, let's just zoom out. This work on measuring abstract ideas isn't just happening in some isolated lab. It's part of a much bigger story, a much larger intellectual project.
Now, you're going to see a list of some pretty heavy-hitting terms here. Honestly, they represent some of the most advanced thinking in math and computer science today. The key thing isn't to memorize the names.
It's just to see that this idea of measuring complexity is part of a whole interconnected toolkit that researchers are building to understand our world in a new way.
So what's the common goal of all this crazy-sounding stuff? Well, it's actually pretty simple. They are all attempts to build rock-solid frameworks for understanding really complex systems. We're talking everything from how an AI learns all the way to the fundamental nature of logic itself. It's all about finding and describing the underlying structure.
This really is a revolution in how we think. Before, we had ways to measure the complexity of a specific, concrete file. Now we're building the tools to measure the complexity of an abstract system. It could be a set of rules, a network, a whole logical structure.
So if you remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. What we're witnessing is the birth of a brand new kind of measurement. It's a universal ruler that doesn't care about meters or kilograms, but about the informational density, the structural elegance of an idea itself.
And that leaves us with a fascinating final thought to chew on. We started this journey by measuring the complexity of a simple string of text. Now we're talking about measuring the complexity of foundational mathematics. So if this ruler for ideas keeps getting more and more powerful, what could we measure next? The complexity of a human language? The structure of an ecosystem? The logic of a legal system? The possibilities are just absolutely profound.